Hey guys, I'm here with Matthew Bertulli, the one and only founder and CEO of Demac Media, who's written an amazing book, Anything, Anywhere. And if you want to know how to get $1 billion in sales, this is the guy to talk to. So we're here obviously talking with Matthew, talking about retail. First of all, Matthew, how you doing?
Good, man.
Yeah.
You got notes in your
I've got notes. This is I've read through this. I've got it highlighted as well. So this is
That's like a marked up copy. That's
that
good.
is a solid marked copy, and I'll probably ask you to sign it after.
Sure, man.
So this is all about retail, and that's what we're talking about. And retail has changed so much over the past years. What, in your opinion, how was retail before, let's just say 10 or 20 years ago, compared to how it is now?
Yeah, it's like so you can actually you don't even have to go back that far.
Okay.
You can go 5 years ago. You can go 10 years ago. If you go 20, that's like the start of Amazon, and it just everything changed after that, right? So like 20 is birth of internet shopping. So I think you go back 10 years ago, and really you were like fairly infantile in online retailing. Brick and mortar, it's still, and let's be clear, right? Brick and mortar is still king today. Okay, the vast majority of retailing still happens. Like we're across from the meeting center right now. People can't see that, but it still happens in a mall. It still happens in a store. That's still like globally, most transactions occur in person, physically, exchanging money for goods. E-commerce, while it makes the news, it is still early. So like 10 years ago, we were even earlier, and the market was probably more than half, like less than half the size it is today, just in B2C. And I think all that's happened, lots tactically, and the details have changed quite a bit, but really, like a bunch of big stuff has happened, but all that's happened is digital channels have just become more and more and more pervasive. Technology's gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and product, physical stuff has gotten easier and easier and easier and easier to make and source and bring to the world, right? Those are your big things. That's all happened probably in the last 6-7 years.
Okay.
Right? 10 years ago, it was like dark ages compared to today. 20 years ago, we didn't have fire. Like in the world of retail, we were just learning how to create fire.
Yeah. So how are retailers, let's just say who started maybe 10 years ago, how are they adapting to this new world?
Not well. Like, frankly, like broadly, retailers, so multi-brand, brick and mortar retailers, they're the ones having the hardest time because they're the ones who the Amazons of the world, and Walmart, they're the ones, that's whose lunch they're eating, right? Brands are having a better time. So like vertically integrated people who make their own stuff, maybe have their own stores. Like to look at fashion, they're the most prevalent, right? But your average fashion and apparel brand that sells online, sells in their own store, sells wholesale, is faring much better than your department stores, for example, i.e. Sears. Right? Sears got decimated by Amazon. Just like, if you could define the word like crushed, it's Sears. So I think broadly, everybody is still trying to figure out what this looks like. And there's the 800-pound gorilla, which is Amazon, which is, I don't think, is defining how the world should work for everybody else. I think Amazon defines how their world is going to work, and they continue to eat up more and more of the average commerce dollar. There's still a lot of room left, and for me, I just focus on that. I look at all the areas that Amazon is just not looking at, and I think that's where the opportunity is.
Interesting. So, in your book, you mentioned how the one thing that Jeff Bezos says, your profit, your margin
is my opportunity.
Right. So, how can a mom and pop shop deal with something like this?
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this today too. So the mom and pop shop. There's two things that Amazon sucks at, right? And you shop on Amazon?
Mm-hmm.
So do I. Okay. You don't shop on Amazon. You buy on Amazon. Right? Nobody, unless they like pain, is going to go on Amazon and just browse around. Because they have 500 million products for sale. Who in their right mind would do that? Just like click and scroll. Like, nobody does that. You go to Amazon to buy what you want. Or buy what you know you want. Right? So mom and pop retailers, like when you walk down a main street, like I live in Burlington, Ontario, we have a pretty cool little downtown with a lot of good little local merchants. The difference between Amazon and them is that when you go in one of those stores, not only are you talking to like a proprietor or like an entrepreneur or their staff, they can help you with inspiration and discovery, right? So what happens when you don't know what you want? Do you go to Amazon? I don't. Right? Like if I'm looking for something but I'm not quite sure what, I don't start at Amazon. Not very many people do. Right? So, buying pens and paper and like that kind of stuff, like commodity, Amazon serves massive parts of the market, but they don't serve everything. And they definitely, and they're trying very hard to become a place where people go to shop,
like the
not just
bookstore.
a place where people go to buy.
Like the Amazon bookstore, right?
Right. So I think that, and I don't think that's an Amazon problem. I think that's just like e-commerce in general is very transactional. It's not experience based. There's zero entertainment value. Right. And that's where your retailer can fill in the gap. A great Canadian retailer is a specialty grocer called Goodness Meat. So like Whole Foods, Amazon just bought Whole Foods. So Goodness Meat competes with Whole Foods. But what Goodness Meat does extremely well is that they run in-store classes and courses, and like they have people come in and they teach them about like how to actually cook and how to use a blender and here's recipes. So they've used education as their platform, and while you can go online and watch a Udemy course or like whatever you're going to do, it's something very different than sitting in a room with 20 other people and talking and all doing the same thing. And there's like tactility, touching,
the experience.
There's senses. Like that is where retail stands head and shoulders above e-commerce right now. All e-commerce, not just Amazon.
So it seems like experience is the new economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think brands, whether they're retailers or they're just brands, they need to figure out how to turn products into experiences, or like decorate their products with experiences. That is still where you can do some serious damage against the big online guys.
So let's just say you take a look at a mom and pop shop that's not necessarily making their own product. Perhaps they're a distributor. How can they kind of capture into this experience side of things?
Like a mom and pop shop. Like the ones I see that do really well, they do a lot of in-store events. And those are usually based on, they're not just like product launches, but like there's a clothing store in my hometown where they bring in reps from the brands they carry. So they're a multi-brand retailer, typical mom and pop. They've been in business for 20 years. They have a really good customer following. They know their customers really well. So what they do is they always bring in reps from the brands that they carry to come into the store for say 2 or 3 days. And then they have events, food, beverage, and all that stuff, where they get customers to come in and talk to the brand.
Oh, okay.
Right? I think mom and pop shops really have to focus on like how human they can be versus how transactional and not all human e-commerce is. Right? So like face to face, this is very different from like you and I even talking. It's very different from like if we were just on the phone, and it would be super different than if you just like sent me a bunch of questions via email and I wrote them back. Right? So take that, think about that in the context of how you buy stuff or how you shop. Like you go into a store and I sit there and I talk with the owner for 10 minutes and I tell them kind of what I'm looking for. They see my mannerisms, they see how I am, they see how I dress, they learn a bit about me, they ask me questions, they know I have a kid, they get more in 10 minutes than e-com guys get. It takes them months to accumulate that data, provided you buy enough. So Amazon can do it, but even then, like there's still not a human being there. So I think that like mom and pop still, if they can get people in the store, which I think is another problem, but if they can get people to come in, that human element is still a big differentiator, right?
So let's talk about the elements that you spoke about in your book, the 3 big trends, the tech, channels, and food chain, right? So obviously right now, because of the technology, that channels are just growing.
Oh yeah, there's so many.
So, and at the same time, the the food chain is obviously a massive impact of that. But if we focus just on tech and channels, what is the big shifts that you're noticing within those?
So, I mean, like first, that technology just has been democratizing, right? So it's like it's becoming more and more accessible and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. What used to be something that like the really big retailers could only afford,
Right.
everybody can buy now. You know, and Shopify being the best example. You know, 10 years ago, you wanted to build an e-com store, it cost you $1 million. Now, $25 a month.
Right.
Right? Like, to just start. So, huge swing there. And all that does is just open the floodgates to a bunch of people who couldn't do this before that now can. And that's just Shopify. There's a whole bunch of other categories of technology now that have also been democratizing, which has opened up all of these channels. Right? And because all of these channels open up and the technology is cheap, it's also way easier to get product made or to start a brand new product. Kickstarter, right? Get your whole thing going. Like, the whole thing is this big, massive wheel that just continues to turn. And as it turns, all of it just feeds each other. So there's a bunch of challenges that are born out of this now, right? So like the big one I see, the big trend, the big like byproduct of all this is there's too much. So you're a startup, you just ran a successful Kickstarter, Indiegogo, you've got some traction, you've got a cool product, you want to bring it to market. Which channel do you go into first? Second, third, fourth, 100th? You know, do you go into stores? Do you have your own stores? Do you have do you wholesale? You know, should you be on marketplaces? Which marketplaces? .com, .ca, Amazon, eBay. Like, there are so many damn channels now because it's so easy to get into them that we have a shiny object problem, right?
Right.
I see it all the time. I talk to young entrepreneurs all the time. Like, so you're a new brand. Where are you selling? Well, I'm in these 12 channels. I'm like, well, that probably means you're not in any of them very well because you're one dude.
Right.
And as much as it's easy to buy an app to connect you with this thing, it's probably not very effective, right? So that I think the byproduct, which is turning out to be quite a bit of a big problem, is everything's gotten so cheap that we're buying a bunch of stuff. Like the average Shopify store that I get to look at has like 20 apps installed, and effectively they're a gym membership. Like you bought that app and it's only costing you $10 a month, and because it only costs you $10 a month, you forgot you had it. You totally forgot you had it.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, who's winning right now? App developers and software companies, because they've got it so inexpensive that most businesses forget to even have this shit.
So that obviously presents a big problem. And at the same time, when you have a whole bunch of social media like Facebook, Pinterest, it's so easy for brands to just put out the same message across all of you. You know, just use Hootsuite, Buffer, just put it across. Should, just like how brands should be thinking about choosing technology in a right sequence, should they do the same thing for social media
with
as well?
channels? Yeah, channels and social. Social is just like one classification of channels, right? So it's like you have to pick which channels are good for service, which ones are good for selling. I think where it gets really tricky with bigger brands is it's expensive to be in all of those channels. So it's technologically easy to integrate into them.
Sure.
Syndicate product and messages. It's a lot more expensive to personalize each one. Which, if you're gonna do, like if you're gonna be on Facebook, what you're on Facebook with, and how you craft content for Facebook, it should be different than what you're building for Twitter,
right,
or Pinterest, right? Most brands are lazy. Most of them, they're either lazy or it's too expensive. Because very few of them have personalized, personalized strategy for each channel. And I most merchants I work with don't, and I don't blame them either. I'm like, Jesus, man. Right. I mean, that you have to have a person in charge of every single one of these if you really want them to own it. Yeah, like you'd have somebody who was just in charge of Facebook and was crafting content. I mean, stuff from a small brand. Imagine for a big one where like you're Walmart and you're trying to be all over the place. Like your teams are huge. And I think you look at like the industry as much as I do, and look at the capital expenditure these companies are making just to be in these digital channels, and like none of them are making money, profit money. They're all putting big sales dollars on the board. I don't know how many of them are actually making a profit.
Well, in your new book, you mentioned something like Nasty Gal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They grew exponentially,
Massive.
but then
And then it hit a wall, right? And like, there's a bunch of things that I think time will, sort of like uncover what happened at a Nasty Gal. But they're not the first person. Like Fab.com was like a famous implosion. And like, there's just a bunch of business models that also were just crappy business models. Fab was just a shitty business model. Let's call it what it is, right? Like those companies all were born out of the 2007, 2008 financial crisis, and there being a gigantic glut of inventory in the world. And every brand out there was just desperate to get rid of it. So hence the private sale, flash sale boom, because there was so much stuff to sell.
Right.
And everybody just wanted something for it. The problem disappeared. As the stuff sold, brands became less and less of an appetite to sell it at 90% off, because they didn't have any more that they needed to sell it at 90% off. Now they got new stuff. So like, those business models got wiped out. Nasty Gal was unfortunate because when you look at the story, it's a really good one. Unique customer perspective. Found a really nice niche customer that they spoke to, right? That Sophia spoke to. Built up the brand around that, and then I think what happened, like my opinion is, got on the venture train, needed to go to $1 billion to make it work, instead of just saying, "Hey, man, this is a really good $50 million company, right? Like, why did it have to get so damn big?"
Right.
Got away from their core customer, started to get away, and by getting away from their core customer, started getting product that did their core customer a disservice. Too much scale, too wide, and then probably the wrong people. Like I've read and heard that brought a lot of traditional retail people in to help scale the business. So they tried to scale the business in the traditional retail way, which just fundamentally doesn't work anymore. A bunch of stuff. I think just the confluence of like 8 or 10 things there. For me though, it all started with like following Nasty Gal early on. And having a bunch of friends who were Nasty Gal fans, and then as soon as I saw my friends start to say like, yeah, the product's changed and it's not really my thing, Nasty Gal's done. Like they had loyal fans, and then they moved to, we have customers, right? Which is the wrong direction. You want to go from customers to fans, build a great business.
The one thing right now that's changed since, at least because of technology in the past 10 years, is the food chain.
Sure.
Right. It's been candlelize, spit out, shoot out. Could you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah. So I call it the cannibalization of the food chain. So like, there was a natural order to things in the world of retail and commerce. Like, this is a big industry. It's like $22 trillion a year globally. I think everything else on the graph doesn't even register compared to that 22 trillion. It's the economic engine of the world. We buy stuff. So in that world of stuff, nice natural order of things. There were manufacturers, there were distributors,
right?
Then there was retailers that would get the product to the consumer. Over the last couple decades, so it started before technology. Like, you had brands like Nike start to open stores and go direct. But in the last 10 years, the curve has hit that exponential growth, where a brand like the North Face went from none of their revenue being direct to consumer to, I think the last number I heard was almost 40%.
Wow.
Of what the North Face sells in a year, they sell directly to their customers. That 40%, you're talking billions, is coming right out of the retailers' pockets that they used to sell to, and is decimating those wholesale distributors that used to sell the North Face stuff to the retailers, so the retailers can sell to the customer. North Face is making tons of money because they're putting all that margin back in their pocket. But the food chain is devouring itself. So the North Face has realized, which I keep using them, so let's just take them as an example. It's pretty easy to get in front of customers now, right? There's a lot of stuff that's happened that allows that to be a thing. And they got comfortable taking that business away from their supply chain. And when you really think about it, the only reason wholesale distributors existed in the first place was that retailers weren't buying enough quantities from the manufacturers to make it worth the manufacturer's while. And the manufacturer wants to sell. If you're a brand and somebody comes along and offers to buy all of your inventory in one fell swoop, you take it.
Right.
One transaction. Super easy. Service one guy. Which is what wholesalers did. They would go to a brand and say, rather than you sell 10 to that retailer, I'll buy 1,000 at a better margin. And then I'll turn around and break it up and sell it to 100 retailers for 100.
Right.
So percentage. And that's what's changed. The retailers, in turn, have said, okay, well, the barriers have also come down in how to make product. That used to be the realm of brands. They used to go to China. They figured out that part of the supply chain. Retailers now have also done the same. You go into any big department store, and there's a lot of the stuff they're selling that they make themselves. It's their white labeled or fully in-house brands, right? Which is taking money away from the brands.
Right.
So the retailers and brands are basically just like smashing into each other and going after each other's roles. Wholesalers are kind of caught in the middle. They're screwed. And some of them are getting better. Like some of them are trying to make products themselves. I know a bunch that are going vertical and they're making their own brands, selling those to retailers. But they're brokers, right? And if you look at somewhere like China, wholesalers don't exist. Their supply chain is so good that there was no need for wholesalers. It's a uniquely Western thing. And because we needed distributors in like Canada versus the US, and a brand would come into Canada and give rights to their brand countrywide to a distributor, and the distributor would represent that brand to retailers. All that means is that customers were paying a lot more for stuff than they ever had to, because there's a lot of people taking a chunk.
Right.
So this is all very good for consumers. It's all very bad for the retail food chain, right? Because we don't know yet. I think it's just all going to shake out that like the world is going to be brands. The brands are going to talk to customers. Where you're going to have multi-brand retailing, it's going to be super focused on like entertainment and experience, like Perch. Those stores in the US are so cool.
So something like if you are a manufacturer, obviously you can cut out the middleman of the wholesaler, and one thing you talk about is not killing the golden goose.
Sure.
So how should a manufacturer versus a mom and pop shop approach this?
Yeah, so this is what I mean. Like the really big brands, they're doing this, and they've got enough enough muscle they can just do it.
Right.
Most of the companies I talk to on a regular basis are pretty they're smaller, so smaller brands and smaller retailers. And the average mid-market brand is very concerned about selling direct to consumer because it causes them immense amount of grief with their retailers. And their biggest accounts are calling them saying, like, you can't sell this direct. Like, you're cutting into my business. So that cannibalization is causing a lot of conflict, right?
Okay.
And I talk about the golden goose because 80-20 rule, like, a lot of the brands I know, 80% of their business is through, like, one big retailer. And if they piss that retailer off, that business goes away. Probably faster than they can make it up in direct-to-consumer business. So this is the conflict. This is like you sit in your average boardroom across North America where you've got brands and retailers at the table, and this is the discussion, is who does what when. Like, I know brands that negotiate when they're allowed to sell stuff on promo.
Oh, interesting.
And they have to tell the retailers ahead of time so the retailers can also sell it on promo. But the brand needs to basically sponsor that margin. It's really messy. Like, consumers don't see this stuff.
Right.
But I see it all the time, where you're negotiating the lines. And
especially when you're dealing with multiple retailers as a brand, that's you have to hire almost the entire team.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and that's what wholesalers used to have in place. And now, so this is what I think is happening. I think that if a brand is willing to go direct to customer, which means they're willing to send one thing to a customer, it's not a huge leap to go from sending one thing to a customer to sending 5 things to a retailer. Right? Not a big leap. The systems, the process, and the infrastructure around fulfillment and returns management to do that, it is the same thing. If you are going to build the tools and the people and the team, all that stuff, to sell something to a customer, you already have what you need to satisfy all of the small wholesale accounts that you used to shuttle off to a distributor because you didn't want to do that work as a brand.
I see.
Right?
Right.
So that's what I think we're really going to see. When this is going to accelerate like just crazy is when more and more mid-market brands realize that by selling to consumer, they may as well just sell directly to all the retailers that they used to not want to deal with because they could just tell them to go on their Shopify store and also buy stuff at this time.
Yeah. So when it comes to, let's just say, building a team to handle this, right, how should a brick and mortar store first approach digital and something like a digital first company like Warby Parker going to brick and mortar?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the digital guys are all going into brick and mortar, and that's because there's lots of money to be made in brick and mortar.
Right.
Contrary to how cool and sexy and all the kids want to do e-com, no, brick and mortar is still that is the golden goose, right? So your digital guys are all going there,
but that's based on location, naturally.
Totally, yeah. So I think and they're being very smart about it. They're using the data they have digitally to direct where they go physically, which is genius. I think you bricks and mortar guys are a little different. They're going from a place of like hyper localization to this big wide world where there's a lot more competition and there's a lot more noisy and how they cut through it. I think I look at bricks and mortar. If you're not doing anything digital, then the right way to look at digital, you're already so far behind. So the right way to look at digital then is like, how can you use it to apply leverage to your bricks instead of saying, I'm going to go compete online against everybody else? Because if you're a brick and mortar retailer and you're not your own brand, you don't have a lot of margin, right? And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to. If you don't have the margin to go online, and by that I mean online is expensive to acquire customers and to run an e-com business. People don't think it's very expensive. There's a different cost structure there,
right,
than it is to run a brick business, right? So, because of that, they're very different types of businesses. So, like a lot of bricks retailers that I know, they struggle online because it's like totally different operations. Whereas you take an online guy who's used to working and competing in this pace and this cost digitally, and they go into the bricks world, which is slow, they can do that jump a lot easier than the other way. That's why like digital first is the way I think everybody needs to shift their thinking. Even the traditional retailers, they almost need to burn down the old operating system, just light it on fire and adopt the new one. It's painful, but it's going to help. It'll help all channels, right? And that changes how you staff. That's like you building teams around that for sure. You know, your average retailer in this country, like go into a Canadian Tire. The person that's working in a Canadian Tire today is very different from the person that worked in a Canadian Tire 30 years ago. Like, very different. Right. 30 years ago, that was a career. Today, it's a transient worker.
Right. They used to know everything.
They used to know everything. You can go into like one of those stores or like any department store, and the person you talk to was super helpful. Today, they're useless. Like, they couldn't even tell you where something is. Like, they stock shelves, right? So, like, that either has to change, or if that doesn't change, like, if that, or maybe technology needs to fill in that gap, like, you walked in and your phone is telling where to go or something like that, I don't know. But I think that's a huge problem for retailers.
Where can people go to get this book?
Amazon, man.
Amazon.
Where it is. All the
behemoths.
Yes. The monster. Yeah.
And could you tell us a bit more about where people can find you?
Yeah, so my personal site, I got a domain that represents a landing page for this. It's just mattbertulli.com, METTBERTULLI, and it's got a great last name for all this. And then our company site is Demac Media.
Okay, and can you say a bit more about Demac?
Yeah, we're a commerce company. So we help brands build e-commerce businesses.
Okay.
That's all we do.
Perfect. Matthew, thanks so much.
Cool.
Hope you guys enjoyed this. Get this book. As you can see, mine has highlights all over it. Fantastic book if you're in retail or if you're thinking about it. Or regardless, you're going to buy something in retail, so this is a fantastic book for you to get. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man. Yeah.